The situation is incredibly difficult and tense, but the fact is we know that if there are rockets fired from Gaza and they're aimed at Israeli civilians in towns and villages on the Israeli side of what is undisputed territory, Israel will retaliate. And you know, we've seen this pattern over a long period of time. And so it's a statement of the obvious, but the only way of avoiding this situation is to de-escalate it, to get a ceasefire in place, and then try and work out a better way forward.
Well, since the Arab Spring, of course, you had this movement by the Muslim Brotherhood, and they're a big player now, a bigger player than they were. Have the Israelis underestimated that?
No, I don't think they've underestimated. I mean, I think they're aware of it, and they're aware of the pressures that will come on President Morsi. But you're in a situation in Israel where, you know, 1 million people are taking shelter every evening. I mean, if you put that in a British context, it's the equivalent, I don't know, 7 or 8 million people. There's no government that's not going to be under pressure to take action in those circumstances. Now, we can, you know, debate the rights and wrongs of the policy towards Gaza in general terms, and you know, we've been working very hard to lift the blockade to try and get some normality. I want to see the peace process revitalized and re-energized. But if you have a situation in which rockets are coming out of Gaza targeting Israeli towns and villages, you will get the retaliation.
You've been making calls, I'm sure, to Washington and other capitals. What can the international community, what can Israel, what can everyone offer the Palestinians which can calm the situation down? What's Washington saying?
Well, in the immediate term, it's just got to be a very simple demand, and obviously Egypt has got a critical role to play in relation to Hamas, but that is that the action ceases coming out of Gaza, the action ceases going into Gaza, and we have a ceasefire. In the medium term, we've got to, and I think we have the opportunity of doing this after the re-election of President Obama, we've got to put an initiative back together that allows us to really overcome what has been a kind of paralysis in recent times in the peace process and get it back on track. I mean, that's the only rational way to proceed. Otherwise, the violence escalates, and then as you see people go into what are very fixed positions. For Israel, they believe their civilians are under attack. The Palestinians believe they're subject to an injustice. You divide the two sides, and you go back into conflict again, and then dialogue becomes very difficult.
In a region which is suffering all sorts of turmoil at the moment already. So will this mean that the situation in Syria, you know, people turn a bit of a blind eye to that as a result, and even concerned about Iran? How does it play into the wider turmoil?
No, I think people will carry on being focused on Syria or on Iran, but there's no doubt at all, where you're absolutely right, is that we have enough upheaval in this region already without adding to it. And this Israeli-Palestinian issue, I mean, I always say this to people, irrespective of the Arab revolutions and the upheaval in the region, it still is dramatically important to the future of the region. So if it goes into a state of violence and turmoil, then I think the consequences will be felt right across the region. I mean, not just in Israel and Palestine. So this is why it's urgent that we de-escalate and de-escalate quickly.